Hi everyone, I'm Skylar with Pacific Coast Farmers Markets Association. Today we're in Stockton, California visiting Gotelli Cherry Farms. We're going to learn all about cherries and see how they're planted, harvested, and grown, and even learn some fun facts along the way. We're so excited to be here and even more excited that you're here with us. Let's go!
We are at the home base for Gotelli Farms here in Stockton, California. We happen to grow down in Kern County, which is the Arvin areas where we specifically grow. And then we also grow up here in San Joaquin County, Stockton, Linden, Lodi, kind of all over the place up into Washington. So we're busy people. Yeah, we have blueberries. The Gotellis grow blueberries. We actually have some clementines down south at our property in Kern County. And then we grow quite a bit of walnuts up here in San Joaquin County. Our specialty is cherries. The Gotellis have been farming, since the early 1900s. My husband's family immigrated from Italy, and the first cherries were planted on the Calaveras River, actually, back in the day. And from there, the operation grew. Now we, like I said, we're kind of a pretty large operation that's grown over the years. We're fourth generation. This is my son-in-law, Drew Rotner, and he is part of our fourth generation crew along with our son, TJ Gotelli.
It's a family business. You know, it's run, owned, operated by the family. 4 generations working in the same company, which is pretty rare these days.
Gotelli Farms has come a long way since the beginnings of their orchards on the Sacramento Delta, now operating a shipping center that sends California cherries all over the world. But despite their growth as a business, the Gotelli family hasn't lost sight of the ins and outs of farming. Farming is all about staying focused on the big picture, especially when it comes to cherries.
Farming's interesting because you work an entire year for something that happens in 3 to 4 weeks. So on one particular ranch, you may be picking for sometimes not even that long, 2 to 3 weeks as you go ranch per ranch. So you work an entire calendar year for something that happens in a short time. So there's a lot of pressure on those couple weeks to get the crop off, to make sure it's not damaged, to get things done, quickly and efficiently. Right after harvest, we'll go through and there's a lot of pruning that goes on. Most of the trees will be topped, so they'll be cut by a machine at a flat level. Depends on the height, depending on the ranch. And then there'll be summer tipping, which is a pruning method that we use. And then after that, you've got irrigating throughout the whole summer and growing season, regular fertilizing, some spraying here and there, depending on what we need. But it's a full-time, year-round operation.
After a long year of careful planning and farm maintenance, these cherries are off to the races. But maintaining a reliable supply of high-quality fruit all season long is easier said than done. There are many different types of cherries, and they all ripen at slightly different times. For Gotelli Farms, growing lots of different varieties is the key to a successful season.
12 to 14 different varieties, and that's including pollen varieties, main varieties. So we have a lot. Usually we're the first ones to start in the early season picking cherries, and we're usually the last ones to finish. We grow early varieties, we grow mid-season varieties, we grow late varieties. So we run the whole gamut. There's hundreds of different varieties out there. A lot of them aren't necessarily good cherry varieties. People are constantly trying new varieties, different trees to bring different types of fruit to market. But about 12 to 14, I think, is our best estimate on the different varieties that we grow. So the average life of a cherry tree would be 30 to 35 years, maybe a little more. That's about, the max life. The production will start to decrease. There's trees older than that are still producing, but on an average, in the 30s, high 30 years. They're very productive when they're younger, and then as they get bigger, obviously production increases. But over the years, trees will start, they do have a shelf life, so they will start producing less as they get older.
Cherry trees can grow all over the world, but California cherries actually ripen earlier than anywhere else. That's because of our Mediterranean climate. It provides the ideal conditions for cherries. And not only does the fruit here ripen differently, cherries in California actually grow differently.
Here, our cherries grow off of the smaller pencil wood. We call it pencil wood. In Washington, they can grow off of your larger branches and they'll cluster around. So
Really
different
interesting.
climates grow different fruit. California is the perfect storm. We're a Mediterranean climate. That's why we can grow so many different crops here. So we have our cold winters, which help a lot of the crops go into dormancy. A lot of the trees go into dormancy. We have warm springs and hot summers. And our big thing in this area is our delta breeze every night.
Yep.
So our
San
orchards
Joaquin
get
County.
hot
Yep.
during the day and then they cool off at night, which helps our cherry size, helps keep them fresh. So they get beat up all day in the heat and then they get freshened up at night. So it's kind of a perfect storm. Weather for the winter would be a cool, foggy weather. So cherry trees need a certain amount of chilling hours, which is time spent below a certain degree. And that puts them into a good, deep dormancy. That way they can come out, roaring to go in the spring. And so we like a nice cold winter with good chilling hours through the day and the night. We don't really like any warm weather throughout the winter, as it affects the chilling hours. And then for a spring, we'd love to have a cool spring, which helps size the cherries, and then followed by some warm weather to help bring them off the tree. I'm ordering my perfect weather right now.
Yeah.
And then once we start picking, we want nice, cool 80-degree weather would be great with no rain and no wind. Nothing's reliable when it comes to cherries, unfortunately. Cherries it's tough. They're a tough crop to grow. There's so many things that can get you. The rain, pests, the heat, trees die. Cherry trees love to die. They do their best to die, we do our best to keep them alive. So cherries there's nothing easy when it comes to cherries. There's nothing for free.
Growing an orchard is no easy task, but there are a few tricks that farmers use to become more successful. One of those helpful practices is called grafting, where a fruit-producing tree is combined with the root stock of another tree with some particular desired traits. Let's turn back to the experts to learn more.
So a root stock is what's growing below the ground. It's our tree's root. And then we go ahead and graft a different variety on top of that root. What it does is it gives a tree different characteristics. So your main variety, which could be like a Bing cherry, may not have the best root system. So we take a root system of a good variety and we graft that onto that Bing cherry, which makes a stronger, better tree. And that can affect things like timing, can affect things like production. And so timing average, you're talking 4 to 6 years for full production for a cherry orchard. So it's a lot of time invested in tree farming.
Wow, the team over at Gotelli Farms knows a lot about farming, but still, sometimes even they need a little advice for how to best manage their orchards and care for all of the different trees that they grow. For that, they turn to their local pest control advisor.
We will work with our local PCA, which is a pest control advisor. They write all the recommendations for fertilizers and all of our insecticides. They'll actually take leaf samples and they'll tell us what the trees are lacking, what they need. After all the cherries come off the tree, it's always good to get a shot of fertilizer on them to help them. They've been supporting all this fruit for a long time and stressing out, so it's good to help them out, give them a little shot of fertilizer. So we work with our local PCA to determine what the best mix of fertilizers and nutrients are for the trees. Most of the cherry trees do need to be pollinated, so it depends on the ranch. Some ranches are different than others, but you'll have a pollen pattern that you plant when you go through, so you'll pick your main variety. So it could be Bing or Coral would be your main variety, for example. And then you'll have your 3 best pollinators that you will plant through the orchard. Every orchard's different, but we have a pollinating pattern that we plant in the orchard. And then that way when the bees come in, the different trees are blooming at different times and then one pollinates the next. And without an adequate amount of pollen, you're not gonna get any cherries. So pollinating is very, very important.
Wow, even the bees have important work to do here on the orchard. At what point in the cherry season does pollinating start?
So all of the pollination usually goes on in March. That's when our bloom starts. You'll see when you drive up and down the roads, you'll see trucks of bees up and down the highway
Hives.
with these big trucks. Most of those bees come from out of state and they are spread around the state, typically starting down south first as the state warms up south to north. Right before we start to bloom, that's when the bees get in the orchard and get ready for those flowers to open up and start pollinating the trees. If we have a cool spring, it will delay the cherries ripening and we'll have a later season. If we have a warm spring, it can bring on the cherries earlier and we could have an earlier season. If we get rain, the cherries will crack, which is game over. It
Disaster.
destroys the cherries. 2 years ago, we had really heavy rains throughout the season and it almost ended the season for everybody. So high winds can bang them together on the tree and bruise them. Birds can eat the cherries off the tree. The weather and the environment in every way can dictate how successful your season is. As a farmer, all you can do is put your best foot forward, do what you can do, control the things you can, and then just let everything else happen and try to accept it if you can.
There are many different challenges when it comes to growing cherries, even just when harvesting them. Cherries are very delicate fruit, so farm workers work super hard to carefully select which cherries are ready to pick and which ones still need a little bit more time on the tree.
Every single cherry on a tree has to be picked by hand and picked by the stem. So it takes time, it takes a lot of people. Down south right now, there's about 1,500 people on one of the ranches picking. So it takes time and labor has really been a challenge. When determining when it's ready to harvest, we do color picking. So what we do is we'll go through an orchard, sometimes 2, maybe even 3 times if we need to. And our pickers will go through and we will, explain to them what kind of color we're looking for. And so they do their best to try to pick the cherries that have colored up to where we want and leave the cherries that haven't colored up on the tree so that way they can ripen in a few days and we'll come back and get them. And then when you send your cherries into the packing facility, they will send you, it's called your pack out, and it will show you the percentage of cherries that you had that were green, they're color sorted. So it'll show you the percentage of cherries that you have that were green. And if you have a high percentage of green cherries on your pack out, then you'll know you need to back off a little bit, maybe give them a couple more days. Color is really the biggest thing. You have to know your varieties. So you have to know that, your corals are coming before your bings, and then what's right after coral, what's right after bing. So if you know your varieties, you can somewhat know what's coming next, but color is everything. That tells us. And then like I said, our pack out slip really helps us to know if we're doing the right thing, getting the cherries off at the right time.
Wait, did he say all of those cherries get picked by hand? How does that work?
So what the pickers will do is they'll have a tub. They'll have a picking tub with a harness on their stomach like this, and it's suspended, and so they're picking into their tub. And then what we do is we have a trailer with a tractor with bins on it in the middle of the row, and they'll dump the cherries into the bin. The bins hold a little over 350 pounds. Those will go to the packing shed. Now the bins that we send to the farmers markets, those are picked right into the tub that we send to the farmers market. So the pickers will pick them in the tub, straight off the tree. They get loaded on a trailer, put them in cold storage, and they're at the markets the next day, still in the tub that they got picked in. So they're as fresh as possible.
Talk about farm fresh. That means the cherries that you buy at the farmer's market were just growing on a tree earlier that same week.
The farmers markets are the best way to get cherries, I feel. I'm sure you
Absolutely.
agree with me on that one, don't you? They're, like we said, they're fresh picked. They go out the next day to the farmers markets. We do markets all over Northern California. You can always find Gotelli Farms at the red and white tent. That's kind of our signature tent, so everybody can find us. And even when I go to markets, if we've been moved a location, I can always look across the way and find the red and white tent. So even I know where to go to assist my workers at the markets. So that is definitely the best route. It's straight from the tree to the consumer in just a short time frame that way.
We like to send the cherries to the market as fresh as possible. The less that we can handle them, the better they are when they get to the consumer. So when we send them to the market, they're in that tub that they got picked in, and we always tell our customers, hey, when you get home, give them a quick rinse in water, throw them in the fridge, and like I said, we try to handle them as little as possible. That way they're fresh and ready for the customer.
Okay, our best seller, for sure, is the Brooks cherry. In fact, I have a tub right here. We'll show you right here. And this is the beginning of the season. So the Brooks, I would say, is probably our most popular
Definitely our most
cherry.
popular.
It can be a red cherry. It does not need to be a dark cherry. So many people think that, oh, where are the Bing cherries? Where are the Bing? Because that's what people know. And that's a dark cherry, but that doesn't always, things have changed dramatically over the years. And so our brook cherry, you can tell, is a more red cherry. You'll get some dark ones here and there, but it's a red round cherry. And the flavor is just fantastic. It can be light colored, it can be dark colored, and it's just by far our best seller in the markets. So this is the first variety out at the beginning of the season. This is where these cherries came from our property down in Arvin, which is Kern County. So, and then they're trucked up and so on, and then brought to the markets the next day. So definitely a bestseller. Another bestseller of ours are the yellow cherry, the golden Rainier cherry. Those are very temperamental because they have to be picked just right, otherwise they bruise. Doesn't affect the flavor, but they'll show more markings on them where it's more forgiving. If you have a darker cherry, they have the same markings from getting picked and so on. You just can't see it. So that's the difference between the two. So yeah, so we bring in Bings. We have coral champagne cherries. But by far, our brooks are the ones to get at the farmers markets.
We sell everything that I grow and everything that the Gotelli family grows to restaurants in the area. So we've sold to grocery stores as well, but we found our specialty in restaurants. So we sell direct from the field to the restaurants. We work with restaurants in Lodi, Stockton, Sacramento, the Bay Area, all over the place. We actually supply the Golden One Arena where the Kings play. With all their fresh produce. They like to buy local produce there. So we sell there. I mean, we pretty much sell to everywhere. It's not hard to find our cherries.
Not only is the farmers market the perfect place for chefs, restaurant owners, and families to go shop for the best tasting cherries and fruit, it's also the perfect place to learn more about where our food comes from. When you buy your cherries and other fruit at the farmers market, not only is it going to taste better and be fresher than at a grocery store, your dollars are actually going to go directly to the team of farmers and laborers that planted, grew, and harvested that fruit for you.
A lot of people, they go to the grocery store and they don't even think that the steak comes from a cow that was out in a field, or that these cherries were grown on a ranch by real people. And the farmers market bridges that gap where the farmer can help educate the customer can learn from the farmer, and they can share that common love, which is cherries or produce. Buying fruit in the grocery store is great. The farmers are wholesaling that fruit to the grocery store, so their price is a lot lower. When you buy at a farmer's market, more of your dollar is going straight to the farm, to the grower. It's not being trickled down through all the middlemen. So really it's just supporting a local farmer who's working their tail off to try to feed the world and feed our community. So that's the biggest thing. It supports that local farm and that family. There's a family behind this farm. And our motto a lot of times is real people, real food. And we take that seriously. There's a real family behind all this fruit.
So what's next for Gotelli Family Farms?
Everything about farming is you're looking into the future. So you're constantly having to make decisions that you'll have to live with the consequences for 10 years, 20 years from now. We are myself, my brother-in-law TJ, and then our in-laws Tom and Missy. So we have a new partnership that we're planting a couple new ranches this year. And we're making decisions on varieties, the way we're gonna plant the ranch that we will be living with for 30 to 40 years. So, decisions that I'll be 70, almost 60, 70 years old, still living with the decisions that we made on this ranch today. So you're constantly looking into the future and trying to decide what varieties will be, important on the market in the future, and what future generations will inherit and take care of.
Cherries are only available for a short season every year. Keep your eyes peeled for them at your local farmers market from mid-April until early June. Visit pcfma.org and search Gotelli to find where Gotelli Family Farms will be selling cherries in a farmers market near you.
Well, that just about sums up California cherries and our adventures today at Gotelli Farms. We hope you guys learned some interesting things and hopefully had some fun with us along the way. We'll see you next time.